We're with Badrinarayan Maharaj, Swami, who is currently in San Diego, I believe. And we're going to find out a little bit about his past and how he came to Krishna consciousness and what inspired him to become a full-time devotee, but especially focusing on his realization and understanding of the Bhagavad-gita, which is really the Bible of the Krishna consciousness movement. So Badrinarayan Maharaj, may I call you Maharaj or Swami? What?
You can call me Swami. You can call me Das Anu Das.
Okay, Swami, B Swami. Just a little background about yourself. I know we know each other for years, but I really don't know about your past, your upbringing. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? What type of religious upbringing did you have? Siblings, you know? So just give me a basic background and before you joined the movement and what you were faced with.
I was raised in Laguna Beach, California. Loving parents, very, very comfortable life. I had it all. I really, felt like a golden boy kissed by the gods.
What did your father do for an occupation?
My father was a executive in risk management, Marsh and McLennan. He insured. He met Howard Hughes. He had a very interesting life. It's a long story, but he was a very good man. He was a very moral and kind. I lucked out, to tell you the truth. And my mother was very religious. My father got turned off by the whole thing. It just didn't, it just didn't hit it for him. He saw a lot of hypocrisy. My mother was devout and also got turned off by I went through Sunday school and all that stuff. And there's some events that made them, have doubts about that.
But what was that? Was it Presbyterian or Catholic?
They were Episcopalian.
Episcopalian, okay.
There's so many divisions.
Right.
But frankly, many years after I became a devotee, many years later, shows you the arrogance I have runs in the family. My father told me one time, he said two things. When my kids were teenagers, I had two children that are now 42 and 43, Anasuya and Nilamadava. And they're nice devotees and making it in the world. But my father told me two things. When my kids were teenagers, and anyone, it's the Bermuda Triangle of raising children. And my father said one time, he said, I'm starting my grandson, his grandson was very close to him. Close to my father, his grandfather. They were close.
Right.
And he told me one time, he said, I'm starting to believe some of your philosophy. I said, oh, what's that? And my father said, this business of justice in the universe. I thought, oh, he means karma. So I said, why is that? He said, your son is causing you as much grief as you caused me. And he was joking, but he actually got a kick out of it. So another time he told me, just out of the blue, he said, I never believed this one life business. Oh. I say, what do you mean? He said, I'm too good to only live once. Which, he came at it from the wrong angle, from the arrogance and pride, but, so
did they ask you to attend church? Probably not, because he wasn't so
I burned out on it, and I used to hide my shoes and hide my tie and my, because I didn't want to go. I was in Sunday school, not because of my father, but my mother's behest. And then after
you went with her?
In those days you would sit there, and then they also had Sunday school. So, I knew how many pipes there were in the organ. I knew how many ladies had hats with feathers. I didn't know how many columns there were in the ceiling, and I knew the whole thing because I was bored stiff.
Yeah, you were not listening to the sermon so much.
I was listening, and it didn't answer any of my questions.
Okay.
I was listening carefully. And of course I was a kid and all of that, But my mother said, okay, if we're not going to take the kids to church, they've got to get some moral foundation and something. So she would read to us for an hour every Sunday. She read the Bible to us. And not dogmatically, but she read it to us and answered our questions. I'm grateful to her for that.
So she gave some purports or some explanation of what she was reading?
Yeah, not much, but we were kids. I have an older brother and I have an older sister. I'm the third. I'm the baby in the family.
Okay.
And so we were kids. We asked questions, So there it is.
Was she able to answer those questions?
No.
Pretty much?
Some, she made it her best shot. But I'll tell you what happened. Because you asked me, so I don't really like, about me, but you wanted to.
Yeah, a little background.
So, if I was surrounded by well-to-do people, materially, and they were not happy. They were not really happy.
How did their unhappiness manifest? How did you?
Oh, you had, kids, very well-to-do kids, completely strung out on drugs.
Okay.
One of my best friends, very wealthy family, committed suicide. There was all kinds of stuff that happened. And I thought, if I stay on this, that was the main thing I realized. There were two things that exercised me. I thought, if I stay on this conveyor belt, I'm going to wind up just like them. And I don't want to be there. Also, what difference are they making in the world? What is, okay, fine. You got your house by the sea and you got your third trophy wife and but you fell off the planet Earth. What difference does it make? So, and I was studying biology. It's a long story, but so the other track that exercised me, I became an atheist because I thought, if there's God, not really, I should say agnostic, because if there's only one life and there's God, why is someone born with sight and someone born blind? How do you, is God just capricious? And I used to ask people that. I used to ask, my priest, I went all the way up the line, I asked all kinds of people. And the only answer I ever got that made any kind of sense was finally a Greek Orthodox priest. I went to the Roman Catholics. I went all over the place,
Okay.
as a kid. And the only answer I ever got was, well, unless there are people who are suffering, then, because we get purified by acts of mercy and kindness. So there has to be a necessary recipient who you are merciful and kind to. If you want to help the poor, there's got to be somebody poor. So I said, what? Somebody just drew the short stick? Oh, too bad for you. You're going to be the leper and I'm going to be the one who builds the hospital for you. That didn't make sense to me. That I couldn't see the, and if there's God, we only get one life. And, half of it we spend reading the back of the cereal box or waiting for the light to turn red or whatever. And if we don't clue in and surrender to Jesus, we burn forever in hell. I said, that's the best God could come up with. That's a pretty funky plan. So I wasn't I just wasn't satisfied. But then, because of my study of science, rudimentary as it was, things fit together. There appeared to be a design. It just, it's the either or question. Either it happened by chance or it happened by design. And answering that really is the essential question. So I read all kinds of stuff, I went to see J. Krishnamurti, with my brother up in Ojai. It's all beyond words. It's all beyond books. I turned to my brother and said, well, why is he talking and how come he's got a book table? So check that box. I went to the Buddhist, and it seemed to me that the desire to become desireless was a self-centered desire. So, okay, check that box. That one didn't work. So, and the Christians, I could not get any good answers. There was good moral teaching. The Sermon on the Mount is profound, for moral teaching. But, you know, okay, check that box. So to cut to the chase, I was riding with some so-called friends in a car. It's a true story. And we'd been at somebody's house. Yeah, what are you doing, man? I don't know. What are you doing? I don't know. What are you doing? Well, nothing. Well, I'm doing nothing. Well, let's go to so-and-so's house. We went over to so-and-so's house. Well, what are you doing? Nah, I'm doing nothing. What are you? Nah, nothing. Well, what do you want to do? Let's go over to so-and-so's house. So after several, you know, from nowhere, going nowhere, and talking completely useless, frivolous conversation, I was sitting in the back seat of this car in some quiet reverie, thinking, I'm going nowhere, from nowhere, and I'm in the middle of nowhere. This, you know, and I saw in the, it was a little VW Bug, and they had a little storage compartment behind the back seat. And I saw a portion of a book. The cover was, the front was off, the back was off. It was only the 6th chapter. And I thought, you know, as long as I'm wasting my time sitting in this car, I might as well read something. So just on random, the thing caught my eye. I picked it up and read it. It was the 6th chapter of Bhagavad-gita. And I'm telling you, it was a transforming moment. It was like those movies, you know, with each page, dong, the bell of truth rings for whom the bell tolls, you know. I'd turn the next page, dong. Literally, all of my main questions were profoundly answered. Deeply, deeply satisfying answers. You know, as I think Thoreau says, you know, it was as if an empire spoke to me. And
now, let me interrupt one little second before I lose my train of thought. Was this Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gita?
And that's the thing. It was by Krishna's grace. I'd heard of the Gita. I read the Penguin Gita. And I couldn't get heads or tails out of it. I could tell, okay, you know, whatever. But it was so vague and so contradictory. And, you know, so that was the only other Gita. I'd read some verses from Gita in class, in school. I'd read the Penguin Gita, but, you know, they didn't move me. So I thought, my gosh, I've read one chapter of this book, and it's been a profound experience. I got to get the full book. So I told my friends, we were downtown Laguna Beach, and said, pull over, let me out. And I literally got out and I walked to a place. Anyone who was in Laguna Beach in the late 60s knows it was a place called Mystic Arts World, which was a famous head shop. And, you know, music store and all this stuff. And they had a library, they had a books section. And I got Prabhupada's Gita. And that has made all the difference.
From that 6th chapter, how did that differ? What did you learn different from what you were taught growing up with the Episcopal or?
Well, the thing is, I got karma and reincarnation.
Okay. What's for those that don't know, the title of that chapter is?
Jnana Yoga. It's meditation. But the point is, in Prabhupada's purports, I mean, so many things are covered. They're just, I mean, Prabhupada's Gita is a jewel box. I've been reading it 50 years. And every time I read it, I get something new. You know, as I grow, as I change, as you know, as I have different experiences in life. I mean, I've never, ever tired from reading Bhagavad Gita. Because it still speaks to me.
Right. How, by reading the Bhagavad Gita, how has that literally practically changed your consciousness or your behavior?
I was thinking of either being a lawyer and a doctor. And I figure, well, there's plenty of lawyers and they haven't done much good for us. So, you know, I was leaning towards, I was taking pre-med and all that stuff. But I came to the conclusion, and hey, I go to a doctor, I'm probably alive because of modern medicine. So I'm not criticizing at all, but I concluded that the best thing Prabhupada says that his spiritual master would say that the only real shortage in the world is a shortage of spiritual consciousness. And if you solve that problem, you go to the root, you water the root of the tree, and the whole tree is nurtured. So I thought, well, okay, I got off the self-centered, let me just get the house by the sea and the trophy wife and, you know, whatever it is, you know, the second house in Hawaii. So I got off that track. Then I thought, well, let me do some good in the world. Let me be a doctor. And then I thought, well, you know, there's plenty of doctors. And if the actual problem, you know, Jesus says man does not live by bread alone. And Prabhupada gives an example in the Gita that a train runs on two tracks. You take one track off and the train crashes. So we need to take, one is conditional. We need to take care of our material life, our conditions. You know, I've got to take care of my health and my children and do my duties in society. Okay, fine, that's one track. Can't ignore it. Well, what about the other track, the spiritual track? I was thinking how Jesus says, man, what is it, does not live by bread alone. You need bread, but you don't live by bread alone. So I concluded that really, there's so many specialists. We got plenty of plumbers and doctors and you know, scientists. Shouldn't there be a section of people who devote themselves to practicing and then distributing spiritual knowledge? I mean, nobody tells, you know, a doctor, hey, how come you're not a plumber? Nobody tells a plumber, hey, how come you're not a lawyer? You need them all. We also need in society, you need monks. You need exemplars of spiritual life, and you need people who are trained in that field, because it is a technology. Mm-hmm. There is an art to the thing. There's a phenomenology in A, B, C, D. You know, it works. There's a methodology. That's the word I was looking for. So for those who practice it and teach it, it's an essential part of human society. So I concluded that the best thing I could do with my life is let me become a full-time student of Srila Prabhupada and use my energy to help the world via distributing spiritual knowledge. That's my personal, you know, that. And I tell you, some people are called to be monks. Some people are called to be musicians. People have, you know, and I was called, frankly, to be a monk. Before I read Prabhupada's Gita, I thought religion was the opiate of the people, you know, and the last thing in the world I would have been was a priest, a dogmatic, pedantic, hectoring priest. Like, what does Blake say? Men in black muttering no. I never would have done it. You know, it was the last, and they didn't look like they were having a whole lot of fun, to tell you the truth. You know?
Well, speaking about fun, how does your the teachings that you've learned in your life as a spiritual teacher and leader in your own right, how has that affected your daily life, your sense of happiness and fulfillment? Well, one thing,
you know, that's a big question. So I'm just going to take a whack at whatever stands out in my mind. But we're not talking about, yes, I'll give you an example. There's a number of examples in Gita, and it compares knowledge. It compares knowledge to a lamp, a light. Why? Because in darkness, you don't know which way to move. There's fear, there's anxiety. You turn on a light, you can see the path. It's compared to a sword. A sword can cut through anything. And this is in the Bhagavatam, another one of our source books, wisdom books. But in the Bhagavatam, it says that knowledge is compared to shoes. Now, shoes, you know, they're not really a very honorific thing. You know, people, if you're mad at somebody, you throw your shoe at them, you know. But the example is that if you walk on a path barefoot, rocks, sticks, you know, you can't traverse it. You put on a pair of shoes, you can walk easily. So the Bhagavad-gita is full of knowledge, news you can use, how to see how your mind is working. You know, we can understand on one hand, it's not so difficult to understand you're not this body. Okay, the body's a vehicle. You know, somebody told me one time, the body's just a machine to move my brain around. So people think, okay, I'm the brain. I'm synapses firing, consciousness is brain function, and that's who I am. But when you understand, wait a minute, you're something beyond that. We're the soul. We're the consciousness is an irreducible element in and of itself. It is not the result of brain function or C fibers firing or whatever it is, you know. And it's a symptom of the soul. Like, anyway, it's a symptom of the soul, because we're conscious means that the soul is present. Each of us is an individual soul. So the knowing that, you can then see how the mind is working. I'll tell you a quick story, and you can cut it or do whatever you want.
Go ahead.
In Ann Arbor, our next door, we had a little preaching center, a little nice little outreach center there. University of Michigan, 40,000 students. And our next door neighbor was Mr. Northcraft, Dr. Northcraft. And Dr. Northcraft was a nice guy. And he was the head of the psychology department at the University of Michigan. And he's, you know, we became friends, and he used to come sometimes. And so one of our senior monks, Tamal Krishna Goswami, was visiting. So I knew Dr. Northcraft. So I said, hey, you know, you should come tonight. It's going to be a great class, you know. And so anyway, it's a long, he was loaning us our lawnmower. He was at my house. He said, okay, but can I use your phone? This is pre-cell phone. There was a time pre-cell phone. Mm-hmm. So he said, can I use your phone? So I was doing some stuff in my office. He was using my phone. And he was trying to break a commitment he had that evening. And I remember him. Now, this is the head of the psychology department, chair of the department for the University of Michigan. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he has a medical doctor and all psychiatry and the whole thing. So he was saying, no. He said, you have to understand, I have to go to my psychiatrist tonight. So he was attending Bhagavad-gita and hearing from one of our senior monks, his psychiatry. So I couldn't help but hear him saying that. When he got off the phone, I said, hey, that was nice. What do you mean? And he did seriously. He said, no. He said, the latter chapters in Bhagavad-gita, you know, anyway, the last few, you know, divine and demonic consciousness, yoga of the supreme, the last 3 modes of material nature, the last and perfection of renunciation, those last chapters in Bhagavad-gita, he said, were the most profound understanding of human psychology that he had ever encountered. Amazing. This is the chair of the psychology department, University of Michigan, you know.
That's a testimony.
So the point, back to my life, to be able to see how the mind is working, mm-hmm. and to say, oh, I'm being influenced by the mode of ignorance. I'm feeling lethargy, I'm feeling morose, or I'm being influenced by the mode of passion. I'm becoming angry. I'm attacked from you know, a contemplation of the objects of the senses. Attachment develops. From frustration of that attachment, anger develops. One's memory becomes bewildered. You know, so being able to connect all those dots and say, wait a minute, this is not me. I am not that passion. I am not that anger. I'm not that pride. Mm-hmm. I'm not that, you know, low self-esteem, whatever it is, mm-hmm. I'm something else. So I found the Bhagavad-gita 2 things. I found it both descriptive. In other words, it was a very clear analysis of how the mind is working, how the ego is working, how the senses are working. So it was a very clear description. And who I am, that I'm none of those things. I'm the eternal consciousness, the soul. It's independent of all of those things. So the description was there. But the key thing to me for the Gita was it was prescriptive. It gave me the prescription. Not only it described, you know, like, okay, you are here. Okay, well, what do I do about it? Mm-hmm. It gave me the methodology, the means to how to control the mind, how to come to what we call the platform of goodness, or Suddha-sattva, purified goodness. When the intelligence is clear, the senses are controlled. Pandita Samadarshana from Gita, to see everyone equally, you know. So that, the profound knowledge of how the mind is working, how the senses are working, that changed my life. And one last thing. The other thing is that, okay, if there's a designer, if there's a cause, if there's some Suhridam Sarvabhutanam, Krishna says in the Gita, who's the friend of everyone. Well, how do I know that person? How do I, how does it become real? And Bhagavad Gita and Prabhupada's purports, commentary, and of course, later on learning from the devotees and so many things, how to develop your relationship with Krishna. Krishna says in the Gita, Yeyatam mam prapadyante, that as you surrender to me, as you serve me, I reveal myself. Prabhupada told me personally, you take one step to Krishna, Krishna takes 10 to you. So what are those steps? That's in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says in the Gita, well, I'll just say this. In Los Angeles, Prabhupada was, it was like a darshan is the word we use, but it's an informal, and Prabhupada would sit with, some guests and students and this and that. So he was sitting in his room, and you're from Los Angeles, Prabhupada's quarters, that first room. Prabhupada was sitting behind his desk. There were probably maybe 15 devotees there, 20 at the most, but probably around 15. And it was a cold day, as cold as it gets in California. We had chadars and caps and sweaters and everything. And Prabhupada had a chadar cap on. He was behind his desk. And there's a window behind Prabhupada's desk, rectangular window. And the clouds cleared for a moment. We've all had that experience. And there'll be a little break, and like a shaft of light, a beam of light will come, just like a spotlight. So it came right through that window, and it shone like a square right on Prabhupada. The rest of us were in darkness, literally and figuratively, and Prabhupada was in this shaft of light, And Prabhupada, who did not miss a thing, Prabhupada picked up on the mood, and he said, yes. He said, someday you will feel this sunlight like your lover's embrace. So it was a sweet moment, But Prabhupada was, Krishna says, I'm the pure taste of water. Krishna says, I'm the original fragrance of the earth. I'm the light of the sun and the moon. Those are all verses in the Bhagavad Gita. Asuhridam sarvabhutanam. I am the best friend of everyone. So that Krishna or God being real and experiencing it. Again, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says there's jnana and vijnana. Jnana is theoretical knowledge, and vijnana is realized knowledge. I wanted, even in my other readings, they hit on some good stuff. How do I realize it? How does it, okay, that's a nice theory. I would read autobiography of a yogi, or so many different things, and I would read about Christian mystics, Rosicrucian books, and all kinds of stuff. Christian mystics, they have their mystics, but how do I attain that state? How does it not remain just imaginary or wishful thinking? Rabindra Swarup said one time, one of my heroes, Rabindra Swarup Prabhu said that, okay, when we met Prabhupada, not only did we were in the tangible presence of a realized soul, it was obvious. Prabhupada was completely self-actualized, as they say. All the lights were on.
Absolutely.
Prabhupada was a self-realized soul, and you just knew it, everything about it. But he was saying, come on, you too. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're at, you get on this process, you follow these steps, and you too can reach this state. So that's Bhagavad Gita for me, was news you can use.
Okay.
Bhagavad Gita is a jewel box. It is just, it is a ever increasing. Prabhupada said one time, if you take a jewel, Krishna consciousness, this consciousness bred from understanding and practicing the Gita, Prabhupada said it's like a jewel. You turn a jewel, you hold the jewel to the light and turn it, and it keeps catching the light in different facets, in different ways, And Bhagavad Gita is not just one jewel, it is a jewel box. So read Bhagavad Gita. On your own, you're going to get profound insight and encouragement. And if you have questions, reach out to the devotees.
Okay, good point. Now, I was saying that you started with chapter
Sorry.
6. Now, would you recommend that a new person that's desirous to read the Bhagavad Gita start with the introduction and not skip chapters?
That Krishna and the saints and sages that have provided this literature, it's laid out as an art. You know, you can't walk in, if you walk into a math calculus class or whatever it is, advanced physics, you know, at Caltech and say, you know, they got 16 blackboards, you know, with writing all of it. So, well, I don't understand. They're going to say, hey, would you take algebra? Did you take advanced algebra? Did you take geometry? Did you take statistics? Did you? No. Well, of course you can't understand. So, and not to minimize Bhagavad Gita at all, but if you read through the chapters, each chapter, the insights and wisdom you gain from that chapter helps you understand the next chapter. To tell you the truth, Prabhupada's introduction of the Gita, if you don't read anything else, read the introduction. It is profound. Mm-hmm. So I not only do I recommend they, you know, I just got lucky and it was enough to whet my appetite. It was not like, I got it all from 6th chapter. Mm-hmm. It whetted my appetite.
Okay.
So I strongly recommend. I mean, they don't even have to buy the book. You can get Bhagavad Gita. You can download it for free and read the introduction.
All right.
It's better to have, you know, buy it, but you know.
Okay. So one last question, and I'll let you go. You've been very kind, very thoughtful.
You've got to go. That's the real thing. But your phone ringing? What's up?
You're also a mind reader.
Somebody at the door?
You're a mind reader. Describe the difference. Like if somebody says, oh, Bhagavad Gita, and doesn't take your advice to read Prabhupada's Gita as it is, explain briefly the difference between a Mayavadi translation of the Bhagavad Gita and Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, 25 words or less. Just joking, but give a simple explanation.
You will get you can get something from those other books. You can also get completely bewildered. Well, I won't say his name. He's passed away. There was a big yogi and so-called scholar of the Gita. And he says, well, Krishna is referred to as Hari. Hari means one who takes away. Actually, it means one who takes away all one's misery, all one's distress. But he says, this so-called scholar, Hari means one who takes away. Well, who takes away? A thief takes away. Okay. Steals things. Well, when are thieves active? Thieves are active at night. Okay, at night, you can't see things. Okay, it's dark. At night, it's dark. When it's dark, you can't see things. When you can't see things, everything is unknown. So he's gone. So then he says, so Hari, when it says Hari in the Gita, it means the unknown, unknowable to all. So he's gone from one who takes away, actually takes away one's misery. He's gone to a thief, to dark, to nighttime, to unknown, that Hari means unknown. So they insert their own speculation. I heard Prabhupada say, you want to put your own theory in Gita, don't do that. Prabhupada, he said it a number of times. He said, write your own book. Go out there in the marketplace of free ideas, write your own book, and go ahead. And then Prabhupada, you know, with perfect theatrical pause says, and see who's reading it in 5,000 years, you know? But don't put your words in Krishna's mouth. Let Krishna say what Krishna intended to say. Krishna is the perfect master, and Arjuna is the perfect student. Arjuna takes the role of every person. He takes our role, and he asks the question. So we should read Bhagavad Gita and take Bhagavad Gita as Arjuna took it, and as Prabhupada took it. Then we're going to, and Krishna says himself, you know, you have to hear from a devotee. I'm explaining the secret of Gita. It's an open secret, but I'm explaining the secret to you, Arjuna, because you're my devotee, my bhakta. So Prabhupada is a pure devotee of Krishna and a practitioner of Gita, and coming in a line of masters and disciples who since time immemorial have been living and practicing the message of Gita. So hear from Prabhupada, and then you'll understand. Right. I tell you this, you can read read Penguin Gita and scratch your head. Read Prabhupada's Gita, and then the light will go on, and then you can go back and read Penguin Gita and you'll understand what they were talking about. That's what I did. And I concluded, well, forget the Penguin. I'm just going to go with Prabhupada's Gita. Why waste my time?
Right. Just elaborate one little bit more on, because Prabhupada does mention impersonalists or Mayavadis within the purports of his Gita. So can you just define the difference between personal and impersonal?
Impersonal means, and Krishna gives a perfect example. One of our teachers, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he would say that the material experience, the material world phenomena, is a dictionary for the spirit. By studying the material, you can understand the spiritual. Now, everything, the impersonalism is saying God is everywhere, God is everything, God is in every atom. That's true. But we say impersonal because he has no independent personal form. They say to say that God has a form means to limit God, and God is limitless. We say, rather, to say that God cannot have a form, a spiritual transcendental form, but to say that God cannot have a form, you, sir, are the one who's limiting God. So God is both present everywhere, and at the same time, Param Dhamma, Param Brahma, Krishna says in Gita, he has his own place, he has his own form. And the dictionary for that is, we have the sun. The sun is present everywhere. During the daytime, that's, not being a nitpicker here. The sun is present everywhere, and yet it's also localized. You can point to the sun. So the sun is both all-pervasive and has a form. So why can't the creator of unlimited suns also be present everywhere and in every atom and in everyone's heart, but also have his own sublime form? So we understand, it's not that the impersonalists are wrong, they're incomplete. We understand everything they're saying, but we also understand the full picture. One last thing. Prabhupada said, Prabhupada loved to ask Socratic questions. And I was in a darshan one time. He asked us. He said, why does the shadow of the hand have 5 fingers? Hold your hand out, shadows get, Why does the shadow have 5 fingers? Don't overthink it, Prabhu. What's the reason? Because the hand has 5 fingers. So we have form, we have personality, we have relationships, we have emotions. How can the cause of us be minus all of these things? Rather, the absolute must have form, pastimes, activities, relationships in full, sublime, spiritual. How can a subset of numbers have anything that's not in the original set? So we've got the impersonal. We understand. We're not saying that they're wrong. It's incomplete.
So by that analysis, the Bhagavad Gita as it is the one to go to.
It's the full package, my friend.
Right.
And I'll give you a home. You can post them. Anyone who asks, you can send them my email.
Okay.
You get a copy of Bhagavad Gita. Read the Bhagavad Gita.
As it is, you're talking about.
You get a copy of Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is.
Okay.
You start with the introduction and you read carefully. And if at the end of Bhagavad Gita, if you don't feel a profound difference, if you don't see a light has gone on, not that everything's answered and everything's resolved and, off you are to, but if you don't feel, wow, this is news I can use, I'll give you your money back. I personally will send you your money back. Karma back guarantee.
That's a testimony.
What's not the like,
The best ad. All right.
The only reason is because I've been a practicing monk trying my best. I got a ways to go, but I'm working on it. I've seen so many people's lives so enhanced and enriched by reading Srila Prabhupada's Gita. I see it. We get letters. We could do a whole class one time on letters and people who've read Bhagavad Gita and what they've experienced.
Great. Well, you made me and others, I'm sure, an offer they can't refuse. So I want to take.
I mean it too.
No, I
I'll
believe
send
you.
you your money back.
You've never lied to me before. So thank you again. It's been a sheer joy and a pleasure.
Thanks for doing
sharing
this. And I
this time
appreciate
with
the
you.
invitation. I
All right.
appreciate it.
All glories to Prabhupada.
Until we meet again, Hare Krishna.
Haribo.